Hello, everybody. Look at this. We've got 4 people on screen. Hopefully, everybody's internet strength is going to hold out for this. Welcome to our first panel discussion of the festival. We're talking everyday activism. And we've got 3 brilliant proponents, is that the right word? 3 brilliant examples of people very much engaging in everyday activism. So I will hand over to them to introduce themselves. So Georgina, do you want to go first and say on?
Yeah, sure. I'm really excited to be in the first panel for the Sustainable-ish Festival. I didn't go with the glitter in the end. I thought I'd leave that at home for the festival and the warm lager. Yeah, I run Pebble Magazine. If you haven't seen me before, Pebble Magazine deals with stylish, sustainable living. So we have a free online magazine and then a big Facebook group called the Pebble Pod. And we did lots of big events last year. So we did 4 big events to 4,000 people in London. And Jen and Ella were both at the first one just over a year ago, which was awesome. So we're not doing that this year, but we are working on other plans. And everything we do is around everyday activism. It's about trying to make those little stylish changes, those sustainable changes, and make everything a little bit more fun.
Brilliant, thank you. Ella, how about you?
So I just want to say firstly, thank you for putting this together, Jen. It's great to have this opportunity. Hi everyone, I'm Ella. I'm an environmental activist who started the campaign in 2018 to make all menstrual products plastic free. And it's sort of blown up and changed my life. It's leading to successful changes in the period industry and has led to so much more as well. So I started out as a postal worker with no formal campaigning experience, and now I'm a fully-fledged environmental activist.
I think that's, you are kind of everyday activism personified in that, like, as you say, you were kind of just bumbling along, I guess, quite happy in your own business, and then suddenly a couple of years later, this is your life. And you're changing an industry, which is just amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty surreal. I never thought I'd be doing something like this, or that I think a lot of us think that we really can't make a difference on an individual level, but we really can.
Okay, be quiet.
Definitely.
Sorry, my kids are just marauding around. And are you Sue or Susanna, Sue? I just called you Sue.
I'm in my mum. So yeah, I'm Sue. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, yeah.
So my name's Sue. I run and write the blog 365 Eco Decisions, which all came about really at the start of last year, the start of 2019, when I decided, just as a little personal project, to spend the year making little environmental changes in our life every day. So I just made one little change a day and I wrote a blog about it. And again, as you were saying, Ella, it sort of led me to a place that I didn't expect in terms of sort of starting off small and ending up, last week I should have been running in the elections for the Green Party, which is really not expected to end up. So so a similar story, starting in one place and ending up somewhere else, I suppose.
Brilliant. I absolutely love it. And I always just think it's so inspiring to hear from like other ordinary people, because I think it's often really easy to think that it's big, or you need to be a big organization to make a difference, or that you need to be some kind of special superhero with special powers and loads of time on your hands and things. But actually, there is so much that we can do as individuals. So let's dive in then. So the first question: what does everyday activism mean to you? So we're going to go the opposite way around and go with you first, if that's all right.
Sure. I suppose for me, what everyday activism means is doing things and behaving in a way that tries to bring about change in an area that you think needs to be changed. So that could be one really small area, or it could be, we need to solve the climate crisis, so let's do something, on a much broader level. But yeah, it's really, I think, about taking personal responsibility to try and make change happen. And there are so many ways that you can do that aren't, you know, gluing yourself to a pavement necessarily, even though that's great if that's what you want to do. Yeah, I think it's about everyday behaviour, kind of living and breathing your beliefs, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely. And can you give us some examples? You said you did, you know, 365 changes, so sort of one a day. What were a couple of the ones that you sort of stand out for you?
In terms of ones that fall under the sort of more activism category, I started off doing things like tweeting companies if they did something I didn't like, or writing to my town council, or emailing my MP, you know, things like that, which are very personal. No one else needs to know I'm doing things actually, but they're all small steps towards, well, I want this to change and I need to tell someone if I want it to change, if that makes sense. So in terms of those 365 days, the more active side of things started off like that, with small little personal contributions. But then, you know, I did move on to join some demonstrations and some of the climate strikes. And I felt completely and utterly uncomfortable in my own skin doing all of that. It was very much out of my comfort zone. But I did it, and I ended up meeting my MP inside of Westminster to have a chat with her. All things I never thought I'd end up doing. And then, like I say, sort of signing up to initially campaign for the Green Party, but then suddenly being a candidate for the Green Party. And it literally was an evolution like that. I think on day 2, I started off with a tweet, and by the end of the year, I was a Green Party candidate. So
you don't have to go that far if you don't want to. You can.
You know, the point of everyday activism is, if you just want to tweet, just tweet. You know, and it's that in itself is incredibly powerful. And I think the joy of it is just being open to where it might lead. It may lead no further than that, and that's great, because if people do that, then change will happen. But if it leads further, you know, it's about what's comfortable and finding your comfort zone, isn't it? I think. Brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. Ella, how about you? Your activism is probably on a level far beyond what maybe to start with, but tell us sort of what that everyday activism means to you.
I think everyday activism for me is something where, if you find something that really gets to you, like Susanna was saying, you can start tweeting, you can start engaging with people. And I think that's the most important thing you can do, is raise your voice about the things that you are passionate and care about, because I don't think we do that often enough. I mean, as a young woman, when I was at school, I never thought that I could make a difference. And it's going back to that and raising your voice and slowly taking steps that are positive, and you, as you go on, you realize actually you can make a difference. If you raise your voice, they will talk to you, and you just have to keep up persevering. Persistence definitely pays off. That has to be said for what I've been doing the last 2 years, getting decision makers to meet and open that conversation. So I definitely think it's different for everyone. For me, I switched to eco-friendly period products, and I thought that was going to be it. But I kept thinking about how all these people don't know about this issue, and it just kept annoying me. And I was walking there, doing my job, delivering the post, and it's the sort of job where your mind can free. So I had a lot of time to think about it, and I knew that I had to do something. So I started the petition. I think that even getting involved with petitions is a great thing to do. So signing them, raising your voice, getting involved with action, but also what's really important is starting conversations with the people around you. That is a form of activism, because you're raising awareness. And what better way to do that than talk to the people close to you, because they're much more likely to listen than me sort of go up to them in the street and say, you know, period products contain a good amount of plastic. And really connect and engage on that level is great with the people around you. It really does make a difference, because they may not necessarily know about these issues, and there's so many issues with menstrual products in general anyway. So yeah, definitely connecting with people around you is a great way to do that.
Brilliant. Lots of people commenting, I don't know how we got onto it, about Natalie Fee and the refill campaign and City to See, and we've got another Natalie from City to See on, not Natalie Fee. So yeah, the refill campaign is great. I was at primary and secondary school with Natalie Fee, so really strange connection. But on that point as well, Ella, about petitions and things, I think, kind of clicktivism has a bad rep, doesn't it? In that, it's kind of lazy version of activism. But I know that, your petition, did I read that, when you had 100,000 signatures on there, it was quite difficult to engage, some of the key stakeholders and some of the period product manufacturers. Once you got to 200,000, then they really kind of sat up and started taking notice. And again, with the earbud campaign, that name completely escapes me, that City to See ran, Switch the Stick, that was all an online petition, and once they got to kind of 100,000, supermarkets started listening. So these things are absolutely worth, obviously the idea is that you click and you make a change in your own life, but for whatever reason, if you can't do that, it's still worth kind of signing the petition, isn't it? Brillo.
I definitely think that, it depends how engaged the person who started the petition is as well, because some people start them but they don't maintain them. But for me, it was very much that I just had to keep going. I after 100,000 signatures, decision makers did start to listen. So it took a year for them to really take notice. And it took a lot of persistence to get them to the table. But also the thousands of people that took action with me helped do that as well, which really makes the campaign what it is that support from people all over the globe. And yeah, it really has changed in the last year. So the first year was quite difficult with getting that engagement, but the second year has been fantastic. I've met now with 10 of the 14 decision makers on the campaign, and we're starting to feel real industry changes, which is fantastic.
Wow. Georgina, follow that.
Really tough, isn't it? Like, I was just sitting here going, gosh, I'm not sure how I can follow that. I think for me, when we talk about everyday activism, it makes it feel a lot more possible and accessible when we kind of put the everyday in front of it. When you talk about activism as a whole, I think a lot of people feel out of their comfort zones. I think a lot of people feel like, well, unless I'm marching on the street and like gluing myself to stuff, like Sue was saying, I'm not really doing it, or I'm not really involved, or I'm not good enough, or not knowledgeable enough. And I think the brilliant thing about everyone on this panel and everyone across your festival is they didn't know anything when they started, or knew very little, and they kind of just started chipping away at those issues and learning and sort of getting more and more involved. And it's a journey. You're not going to sort of decide to be an activist and then the next day it's all done and the issues are sorted and you can tick everything off your list. It's a kind of exploration, if you like, and the best way to start it is at home, and making those small decisions and making those small steps into changing, whether it's stuff in your bathroom or your kitchen or your clothing or your recycling or your politics or whatever it is. There's so many issues out there, and I think again we can feel really overwhelmed by we've got to solve everything. And when we talk about climate change and when we talk about, Extinction Rebellion and things, the issues can feel so huge and so global. It's really easy to write them off as like, oh, well, I can't do anything, or it's up to the government, or it's up to, the UN or whoever to solve it. And I think by making it every day, we're pulling that power back, and we're pulling back some responsibility and some engagement, so that we feel like we are making a difference. And actually all the campaigns that you've talked about, and Ella's campaign and the refill and like anything to do with the straws, they've all come from the bottom up. They've all come from us and made that change. We haven't waited for governments, or God knows where we'd be if we waited for the government. So I think, the power is with us, and that's to me the really exciting thing about everyday activism. I mean, when I started Pebble, I was just looking for a place where I could read about permaculture and organic farming and ethical fashion all in one place. And it's led me down this massive journey like everyone else, and completely taken over my life, as well as I know all your campaigns have taken over yours. So I think, yeah, get ready for life-changing things to happen, I think.
Ella touched on it before about saying, she found an issue that suddenly became really important to her. So, I think Ray was talking earlier about your values and sustainability, and kind of, almost, picking the values that are the ones that you really want to focus on and are most important for you. So, that can be one approach into it, can't it? Kind of picking on a particular thing, whether that's plastic, whether that's food waste, whatever it is. But that's brilliant.
We say with the magazines, shop your values, and it is pick something and start there.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is that we'll talk in a minute about kind of activism and how that word in itself can be off-putting. But one theme that I think is going to run through the festival is that every action that we do has the potential to be an act of activism. Everything we buy, everything we because we're kind of voting for organic, or we're voting for fair trade, or we're voting for less plastic, or we're and then we have the potential to amplify those changes by sharing on social media and things. And that's another kind of act of activism that maybe we don't necessarily like. I don't think of myself as an activist, but I think I probably am. Do you know? But yeah, so it's really interesting how that word activist, that word activism can be quite off-putting for a lot of people, can't it? And have you found that, Ella, in your work? Because you describe yourself as an environmentalist, don't you?
Yeah, it took me quite some time actually to identify as an activist. I kept identifying as a campaigner, but then I was like, really, I'm an activist. I'm doing this all the time, every day, and I think we're starting to reclaim the word, because it had very negative connotations with it, particularly in the 90s and the early 2000s, with it being very aggressive and individuals, throwing themselves at police. So I think that we're definitely starting to reclaim that word, and it's a good thing to be an activist. You're being active about something that you're passionate about, and what better thing to do? You're being true to yourself. I think it's a great thing.
Brilliant. Georgina, I know like the theme of the Pebble Festival, I think that Ella and I were both at, was everyday activism, wasn't it? Do you find that people kind of step back when they hear that word activism, or what's your experience been?
I think I totally agree with Ella. I think, perhaps maybe slightly older people, or still kind of feel a bit like it's not really them, and you need to be sort of hempy and have dreadlocks and kind of not enjoy anything. Everything's a battle, and it's not about things being a battle. It's about, as Ella said brilliantly, it's about being passionate about something and stepping up and sort of saying, I want this to change, or I want this to be better. And you touched on a minute ago, every decision is an active decision. The power that you have is to do with the money in your pocket and where you spend it, and where you decide who's worthy of your money. That is an activist mentality in itself. So I think just being a bit more conscious about what you're doing and what you're buying and who you're supporting is everyday activism. And I think people are starting to think more like that, and I think they want to make changes. So whether they see themselves, protesting on the streets or not, I think people want to change, and that has to come from us all being activists.
Yeah. I mean, we've said, I don't know what the technical dictionary definition of activist is, but if you view it as somebody taking action, and we've got a theme running of imperfect action, and I'm sort of imploring everybody at the end of every session, what's the action you're going to take? What's going to change from this? And I guess that's what it is, isn't it? It's taking action about the things that you care about. So you said, and it sounds like you had a very similar experience on sort of climate marches to me, and I was just like, this really isn't my comfort zone. I'm really, really finding this really difficult. But do you connect with the word? Do you think you're an activist?
I would never describe myself as one. No, I
we'll
think
work on you.
The first time I went on a march was the Mother's Day March, International Mother's Day March last year.
I did that one, I think.
Yeah,
in May, I can't remember. Yeah,
and it was all very lovely. And I went with a couple of friends, and I had, I made a t-shirt. I didn't have a placard, that was a step too far for me, but I made a t-shirt and got my kids to put their handprints on it and all of that. And I got there and I felt like an absolute fish out of water. I was just like, this is not me at all. And I went back, I did a couple more climate strikes and things, but I still don't feel comfortable with that sort of activism, to be honest. And I think, not because I don't agree with it, because I absolutely do. I think we need activism at every level. We need disruptors. We need people that will sit in trees and until someone says they're not going to cut it down anymore. And we need people to super glue themselves to stuff. I think all of it is so important, but then it's so much about identity, isn't it, and what you're comfortable with, and that's just ingrained in us all. Because I think the word activism sort of comes with the idea of being disruptive or standing out, or just that kind of being a bit naughty, and we're not all necessarily comfortable with that image, and that's okay, isn't it? If you're not comfortable with it, then either do it and sit with the discomfort, or don't do it, I suppose. I do remember one really funny incident where I was walking through my hometown one Friday. We've got a little clock tower in the centre of town, and there was just a family, a mum and her 2 daughters, sitting under there. It was a Friday midday, and they were doing their own little climate strike in the centre of our town. This was about a year ago, and I thought, well, obviously I'm going to go and talk to these people. So I went up to them and started having a conversation, and we've got common ground, right? We care about the same thing. But very quickly I felt myself recoiling from the conversation, because the tone of it just wasn't my tone, if that makes sense. So again, I'm glad that they were there and they were doing their thing, but I also recognized quite instantly that wasn't my way of doing it.
And I think that's
I really thought about why was that, and why was I comfortable with some ways and not others. And it's useful to just to work that out, I think, and work out what you are comfortable with and what you're not.
Yeah,
and it's all good.
Yeah, Alexander shared a quote in the last talk, actually, by the guy who wrote Project Drawdown, saying, and I'm going to quote it inaccurately, but it's something like, the one thing about climate change is there's no one thing, there's no one solution. And it's the same about activism, isn't there? We can all find our own brand or our own type of activism. And you're talking about kind of being naughty. When we were doing our year Buying Nothing New, and I was invited to give a TEDx talk, and the theme was everyday radicals, and I was like, I'm not a radical. I'm just like little old me, and I'm sticking to the rules. And but actually, that act of buying nothing new, of saying no to this kind of constant treadmill of consumption, is actually quite a radical act in our sort of modern societies, isn't it? So that was just like really kind of, maybe and I always think, mending your stuff is a kind of a radical act. Saying no to, choosing plastic-free period products is a radical act. So can you give us some exampple, each of you, of kind of easy everyday activism? And whoever's going last is going to be like, please don't make me will have picked it. Susanna, you did 365, and you've already talked about some of the kind of more overtly activism ones, but were there just some sort of easy swaps that you made that you now sort of think, in the context of everyday activism, they're something that we can all do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I suppose the time I realised that I'd been an activist, in inverted commas, was when I got a phone call from one of my best friends one day, and you'll like this, Ella, and she asked me whether I thought she had her cup in right. No, she even read my blog.
So you're talking about her menstrual cup in any case, and I was thinking, what's she on about?
You know what I'm on about. So, and it was somebody that I didn't even realise really read my blog. We'd never really talked about it. I knew that she followed it, but I wasn't sure she actually read it. And this was about 6 months into my year. And I realized at that point that I'd been part of her decision-making process to try something. Yeah. It's like, oh, that's exciting. And actually, it's just starting conversations, whether that's a very purposeful one, you know, of telling someone what you believe in or what you're doing, or whether it's more subtle than that and actually just demonstrating through your own actions and talking about the things that you do without necessarily saying you should be doing this too to somebody else is really powerful. And I think actually I've seen that amongst so many friends and family that have made changes in their way of doing things just because we've started a conversation, essentially. Yeah. Just because the seed's been sown and that's made people think about something that they might not have thought about. So I think really doing those tiny things and talking about them is hugely key. And you know, you're talking about spending money. There's a sustainability food writer, Anna Lappe, and she says every time you spend money, you're casting a vote for the type of world you want.
It's one of my favourites.
Yeah. Right. And when people ever ask me, you know, a lot of people say to me, well, what's the thing that I do? I don't have much time and I don't know where to start and it feels so big and I feel a bit helpless. I always say that to them, just be really aware of how powerful the pound in your pocket is. You know, when you're about to buy something, think about what it is you're going to buy and whether that's really where you want your money to go.
Yeah,
because everybody wants the pound in your pocket, right? Yeah. Everybody wants you decide who you really want to give it to, and that says a huge amount. So definitely over my 365 days, it was changing what I did with my pound.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I ended up with quite a lot more of them in the bank because that's a lovely byproduct, isn't it? But you know, buying less, but buying from people that I really want to support.
Yeah,
you know, I think it's huge.
Somebody said in my session at 9, I was talking about this, and this, you know, as you say, the sort of power of our money. Apparently at the Eden Project in Cornwall, there's a banner over the till and it says, "Your wallet is your weapon."
That's brilliant. I like that a lot.
Yeah, that's really good.
So Ella, I'm going to take a punt that you're going to say, you know, an easy change is to switch to plastic-free period products, but you might
I think that when we become aware of the impacts of the products that we use are having, there's that huge propensity to change everything at once. Yeah. And I think that for me, that was something that I found quite hard at the start, because before I even started the petition, I was thinking about what I was consuming and the waste I was producing through the products I was buying. And for me, I'd say that the best thing that you can do is take it each step as quickly as you want to take it, because if you take things too quickly, it can become a very negative experience. Because, I mean, you know, some of the first swaps I made was the plastic bottle to reusable bottles, washable makeup wipes instead of disposable ones. And I was feeling so positive about the changes that I was making. I think that high from making those changes and knowing that you're doing something good needs to continue, rather than being very like, I've done this wasn't right, and like just being really nitpicky with yourself, because it's not going to help. We're all becoming aware of this slowly, and there's no right or wrong way to approach it, but making those small steps is great. And for me, something that took a long time was to find, for example, the right shampoo bar and conditioning bar. I must have tried about 10 different ones and they just weren't the right one for me. But it's like, if you go in,
then what is it? Because I've struggled and I still haven't found what have you found?
For me, the ones that I have had the best experience with is Ethic. They're a bit pricey, so I waited a little while to get it, but that was the right one for me.
And
I think
amazing.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. It's a bit longer now. But yeah, I think it's definitely making those changes at the right pace for you, for sure. But also, as Susanna said, is raising conversations with those around you as well, and saying, oh, did you know you could get washable makeup wipes? Oh, no, I didn't know I could get washable makeup wipes. And then you realise actually you're saving money and you're saving the planet at the same time. And often people absolutely love it when they can do both at the same time.
Yeah, and I think part of campaigns like yours is, part of the campaign is education, because I think it wouldn't occur to a huge amount of people that their period products have, is it like 90% plastic or something? Like they just wouldn't occur to you. But then, and like wipes are plastic, and once you learn that, you're like, oh God, I kind of want to do something about that.
Yeah, there's so many things that we don't know about, and this is where, when we as consumers start to question it, we're then starting to find these things out. And without those questions, you're never going to know. So one thing that shocked me was the plastic in tea bags. Randomly,
like,
like I was like, what? That's something that I was surprised about. But with period products, we don't have the right conversations at school. It leads to a taboo. We don't talk about it. We're given branded products from a young age, which then starts a consumer cycle, and we don't question what's been given to us because we're given them by adults. So when we start to see these things as they are, if you can, it's a very personal choice. So I wouldn't say like you should use this, you should use that. You have to use what's comfortable to you to start you on the right track, basically. So what I would say is switch to something that you're already using, but environmentally friendly. And that's a great thing. And I mean, for example, another good thing to do is, I don't know if you heard about the latte levy, that they were trying to get it through, and then I think it was Costa Coffee stopped it from happening. So I don't shop at Costa Coffee anymore because of that. So there's different things that you can do to put pressure on it, and it doesn't have to be a huge thing. You can go to a different cafe instead, preferably.
Yeah, it's not just where you spend your money, it's where you don't spend your money as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Georgina, have you got a few or a couple of easy kind of everyday activisms, or your favorite everyday activism?
Yeah, so I've been thinking about 3 while the girls have been talking, and like really hoping that I remember them both. Because when you make a note and you're like, oh, I must say this. So Pebbles, like the other ladies on the panel, Pebbles led me down this sort of journey of exploration and trying to figure out what's best and what works for me as well. And it is so, as Ella was saying, it's also personal. But I stopped buying like fast fashion and new clothes 2.5 years ago. So outside of like underwear, which obviously you still want new. Everything else has come from vintage shops or secondhand shops. I have bought the odd thing from like an ethical brand. That's kind of my thing now. If I really do need something new, then I'm saving up and like treating myself to like 1 pair of jeans or something a year, and then trying to make do with secondhand and everything else. And I think the first year I kind of didn't buy anything new, and then I got to that point of like, oh, but I actually just need something that I really want to fit well, rather than like, I found this great stuff in secondhand shops, but it's probably not the best fit. So now I try and balance the 2 things out and try and support some of the amazing sort of ethical clothing brands that are out there. And then another reason sort of why I started Pebble was I was traveling all over the world about 10 years ago, working as a travel editor, having on the face of it a really lovely time, but just got racked with guilt over all my emissions and carbon footprint and plastic footprint and everything else. I mean, I was doing like 30 flights a year, which isn't great. And now I've flown once, I think in 18 months. So it's just kind of like condensing everything and sort of saying, I'm not going to do that anymore. Before Corona kicked in, I went to Amsterdam and Paris in the same week on the Eurostar. It was brilliant. It took a long time, but it was brilliant. I could work, I now take the train to Scotland. We're going, have anything up there. And I think sometimes you kind of need to draw a line in the sand in your own mind and be like, okay, I'm going to try not to do this anymore, or I'm going to change to this, and see how far you can go with it. You know, often you'll do it for a few weeks and then it's quite addictive to keep it going. You get quite a buzz out of it. And I think that for me, the third thing as well is what I find really helps the sort of everyday activism and sustainable living and steps and stuff is actually finding amazing brands to swap to, because then you want to support them as well, and you want to be excited about the innovation, or the fact there's a shampoo bar coming out, or there's now like bamboo toothbrushes, obviously, but you know, whatever that next step is, there's so many amazing people creating products that you want to support and you want to give your money to. So I know sort of a big reason why Pebbles sort of filled a really big gap for people is that we promote and, you know, introduce people to all these different sustainable items and swaps and things. So it's not just sacrifice. You're kind of, you know, you're doing something better.
Yeah.
And I think there's that idea, you can't just take everything away and not do anything. We are all going to spend money at some point, and right now we're going to need to spend that a bit more. So let's make it do better.
Yeah, definitely. Now, one thing I think that puts a lot of people off starting, or, you know, as you say, that the whole thing is really overwhelming, and actually, can we make a difference? Can our individual choices, can our individual everyday activism really make a difference? And I think, you know, that's a question a lot of people ask themselves and think there's no point because they see Joe Blogs up the road doing X, Y, or Z. How do you kind of balance that, Ella? How do you work that in your head?
So everyone really can make a difference, and if people together raise their voice for an issue that they all care about, it can lead to significant change. And the petition that I started is proof of that. Hundreds of thousands of people that have come together from across the globe, together raising their voices, has led to changes in the period industry. And there's even going to be more happening later this week as well, which is really exciting. And I think it's that snowball effect of we'll email, we'll mass email, we'll do this, we'll do that together. And it really does have an impact. I mean, I didn't think when I pressed that start a petition button that it would do anything. I was a postal worker. I thought I'd sort of adapt with it. And then it went to 100,000 in like 6 weeks. And I was like, okay, I've got to do something with this. So, yeah, it definitely, if we all start to come together, which is what we're doing, we really can create change and positive change. And also, if you speak to your councils about the way that they spend money as well, that is a great way to create change, because it's not something that many people think about, the way that councils spend money, but it is a good way to have an impact.
Definitely. And I think that it's very easy sometimes, especially if our friends and family aren't that, you know, on board with the changes that we're making. I think Susanna said this as well, that to feel like you are on your own and therefore it doesn't make a difference. But, you know, like, we've got 2,000 people come together for this festival in 2 weeks. And, you know, just imagine if everybody makes one change, that's 2,000 changes. And that's where you really do. And they tell a friend and they each make a change. Like, wow, this could be huge impact. So I think when you can very visibly see, and like with petitions and things, you visibly see those numbers mounting up, it's really, really inspiring.
And just like when the campaign is taken action, if a decision maker hasn't decided to speak to me, and we then take action, I've said things like, you know, we got tens of thousands of emails. So we were running around our office and we didn't know what was happening. So it really does alert them to the issue. And I think unless you contact them and actively speak to these people that make these decisions, they're never going to think about it. They're never going to start that journey towards becoming more eco-friendly and avoiding more plastic. You have to have that conversation with them and that journey as well, because it does take a long time for product development to happen. It's not going to change overnight, especially with these manufacturers that have huge factories. So you really do have to keep that pressure on as well and persevere with it.
Yeah.
So yeah, it does create change, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to remember as well that everybody is an individual. So each of those decision makers is an individual, and if they chose to take responsibility for their decisions, Boris Johnson is an individual. He could make very different choices. So could Trump. Let's not get political, but every person is an individual and has that potential to rethink their choices. So, Sue, how about you? Are there sort of values? You've got a really good following on your blog, haven't you? And you said you've seen the impact of people reading it.
Yeah, which came from nowhere, really. It's a bit bizarre. I don't know, but obviously the vast majority of those people. But I think I went to see Chris Packham do his Darwin Day lecture at the start of this year, when we could still see people. And he said during his talk, he said, you might feel like a drop in the ocean, but what is the ocean if not a multitude of drops? That's so true, isn't it? Cumulatively, we're a huge force. And, when I look at the huge changes that did happen last year in terms of, for example, with single-use plastic, the changes that did start to happen in supermarkets, they haven't happened because supermarket bosses have suddenly turned into altruistic, lovely people that just want to do good. I would hope that there's an element of that, but it's also because their customers have started to demand it. And we have to take credit for that a little bit, because we've all been everybody that's bought a reusable coffee cup or a reusable water bottle, or has decided to, even people that unpackage their stuff at the supermarket tills, whether or not on a practical level that really does anything, but all together those little actions actually add up to someone saying, okay, we obviously need to do something different. And if I don't really care what their motivation is, as long as something changes, right? So yeah, absolutely. We are a very, I think.
Yeah, Sarah's just put a lovely quote in the chat. It takes just one candle to light a room, which wow. And Georgina, I think, am I right in saying that the name Pebble came from that sort of pebble on a beach analogy?
It did, yeah. It's funny how all the analogies are going back to the sea at the moment. It's really nice. So yeah, I mean, one of our hashtags that we've used since the beginning is Pebble makes ripples. It is called Pebble because we wanted to see that positive action and those changes at a mass scale. And for me, having something that's a stylish magazine inspires people to make changes because they can see it as approachable and accessible. And we wanted to help make those changes through positive storytelling, through encouragement, through inspiration. Because as everyone's sort of said here, no one exists in a vacuum. We've all got work networks. We're all in Facebook groups. We're all on Facebook and on social media. Those shouting about what you are doing and what you've learned or what you want to change to or what journey you're on, it really does make a difference, and people do take notice. That's why influencers are influencers. It's why they work. It's why people use them, because we are influenced by the stuff we see online and offline. We get emails every day from people saying they've read something and they've changed something, or they've swapped to something, or they've found a new brand, whatever. And that to me is that's what I want to happen. That's just brilliant. But I do think there needs to be more coming together across, whether it's across counties or countries or at different levels, because we are, it is all bottom up, and at some point we need some top down stuff happening as well. We are all influential and brilliant in our own right and doing amazing journeys, but yeah, we need sort of collaborative action as well.
Yeah, definitely. And the final question, and then we've got some questions in the guys, everyone watching, there's an ask a question thing in the bottom menu bar thing, and if you've got specific questions, pop them in there, and it just saves them getting lost in the chat. But Ella suggested this question, and I think it's brilliant. What have you found difficult about everyday activism? And we'll let Georgina go first because she went.
The difficult one, I've got to go first. I think it's, for me, it's stupid stuff like recycling. Not that it's difficult, but knowing the ins and outs of it when it changes from like council to council.
Yeah.
And like I've moved house in the last year and I've had to relearn all the systems and stupid stuff. Like I've got loads of old shoes that I've absolutely worn to death and no one would ever want them. What do I do with them? And I think, you know, there's a lot of information that we don't have to make these changes and make it easy. And you know, I think especially in the local area, which is what Ella sort of picked up on earlier, you know, there's a lot of still vague information about how our town councils run or how our county councils run and how they spend money or what impact we can have there. That to me is like the next thing to tackle. And yeah, to get on top of recycling differences.
Yeah, yes. I think there was a plan at one point, wasn't there, for it all to be kind of you know, made the same, but I presume it's all got lost in Brexit. And
can I say one more quick thing? I think there is also this pressure that we have to make every decision a right decision, and that every day has to be an everyday activism day from morning, noon, night, everything that you do, and it's okay to mess up, and it's okay to go, I can't do that today, but I'm going to try and do it tomorrow. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, it's not a crash diet, which I know I've kind of compared it to before. It's a lifestyle change. So I think patting yourself on the back is important too.
Yeah, I think that, you know, this it can be really easy to feel like we've got to make the best decision every single time, and actually it's about making better decisions more of the time. You know, so let's, as you say, kind of step by step. Sue, is there anything you found particularly difficult when it comes to everyday activism?
Me, sorry, you cracked up a bit there.
Sorry.
Sorry, for blank, so I assume so. Do you know what I think has been difficult for me is, and it's sort of to the same point to a certain extent, is that once you have a voice and people start to see you as that person that talks about those things, is the scrutiny, to be honest with you. You know, and I have had comment from, you know, from people I know actually than anyone online or trolling or anything like that, but more from people who I know who kind of almost seek to catch you out.
With a plastic bag.
And yeah, and it sort of then sort of standing up for yourself, I think, and as you were saying, to say, you know, I never aimed for perfection, and actually I don't think it exists anyway, because it's all far too complicated for perfection to exist. So yeah, I would say the scrutiny can be quite difficult sometimes, but more on a practical level, it is hard sometimes to not do the convenient, easy thing. And I'd be lying to say if I said it wasn't, because there are times where actually you just want life to tick along and for it to be easy, and everything around us is being built to be more and more and more convenient, isn't it? So having to let go of some of that convenience isn't always easy, but I try to do it most of the time.
But again, also, you know, that sort of being kind to yourself and accepting that, you know, we're all busy, we've got kids and jobs and various things, and sometimes you do just pick the kind of convenience, you know, and we live in a society where convenience is king, and yes, we need to kind of question that and push back on that, but we also need to allow ourselves some slack, otherwise it just becomes too hard, doesn't it? It becomes exhausting. This was your question, Ella. What difficult?
For me, I think when I first started the petition, I was working full-time as a postal worker while spending more hours actually on the campaign outside of work. It was hard to balance that time, and I think I've been very much going 1,000 miles an hour all the time, and this whole situation that we're having at the moment has forced me to slow down. So I'm definitely taking the time to take care of myself as well, which isn't something that I've been doing. I think once you get one result, you just keep going, and I haven't really thought or taken the time to think about the results that have happened. I've just kept going and going and going. Also, in the first year, it was hard to get decision makers to take me seriously, and they just kept sending me their emails and their long excuses as to why they couldn't do something, or just to keep me quiet basically. But through perseverance and the supporters on the campaign constantly pressuring them, they have come to the table. And I just think even if you switch out or you switch in for a while, whatever you do is a good thing. The fact that you're thinking about it, that you're changing your habits, changing the way that you're buying, is all a positive thing. And it may take longer for you to make a certain change, but that you're thinking about it is the best thing, because you're already partway there.
Definitely. And that's put in the chat, better to do something imperfectly than to do nothing perfectly. It's a quote by Robert Schuller. Right, there's a few questions if you guys have got time. Let me see if I can get those up somewhere. Questions and answers. Right, here we go. How do you get everyday activism out to people who aren't already in the same mindset as the people at this festival? That is a brilliant one. And I think maybe if we just do like one person on each of these. Does anybody want to volunteer to answer that one?
I can, if you like.
Yeah, go for it.
So one way that we do on the magazine, and that I do in general when I'm talking to friends who aren't in this sort of mindset, I don't really lead on the sustainable stuff. Like if you're talking about a new brand or a campaign or whatever it is, I maybe lead on how brilliant it is, or how cheap or not cheap it is, and really sort of make the sustainability thing the second message. So you're telling people, getting them excited, telling them the benefits, how much things are going to change, help them save time, save money, all those other messages, and also making sure that they know, they're not. It's not a defining moment. If they don't do this, it's okay, and sort of take the pressure off a bit. You can't bully someone into it, and you can't push them into it, but you can inspire them and encourage them. We like to say, like, we're the carrot, not the stick.
Yeah, definitely. And
sometimes I need a stick. But a
whole session on this, on how do we make sustainability mainstream later on in the week. But I think it is just, that's how we're going. We need to reach a critical mass, and we need to get those kind of people who are on the fringes, who are maybe just starting to think about the climate and the future for their kids and that kind of thing, but not really sure what to do. And how do we bring them in? And that, it's a massive question. But I love that kind of approach, leading with some other things. Like when we did our year buying nothing new, my husband was much more on board with it once he realised we were saving quite a bit of money.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. Sustainability.
Yeah. Next question. How do you move from individual activism to group activism? What is the secret of effective leadership when people are all volunteers? Any examples of effective models? They tried to use the transition town model. We're looking at the community organizer model. That's Ella, you might be someone to talk on that, because I don't know, do you work with lots of volunteers and things, or you're definitely the kind of leader of your campaign?
Yeah, I do. Well, I'm the individual that sort of orchestrates the campaign actions and everything, and that gets individuals to take action with the campaign. But I've also been doing work with councils, but I haven't so much done as much, say, with voluntary groups. I think that a good thing to do is, if you've got something that you're particularly passionate about, is find a group in your local area that appeals to. So I don't know, say if I wanted to do something about plastic in my local area, I'd check and see if there was a plastic-free Brighton or a Friends of the Earth Brighton group, and looking at all the people who are already there, so that you can sort of connect and then make that bigger, because through collaboration and using our voices collectively, we can have a bigger impact, especially at a local level.
Yeah, and I know that Surfers Against Sewage, with their plastic-free communities, that seems a really, really good framework. Lots of people.
Yeah, it's such a good idea.
Find that very
get people together.
With. Yeah. And I know that the refill app we were talking about, Natalie and City to See earlier, the refill They have refill communities around the country as well. And again, that seems like a really nice, easy framework for people to pick up and run with. I don't know if anybody else had anything to... Sue, did you have any experience when you were sort of doing your Green Party things around that?
Not really. I think you're right. I think there's quite a lot, certainly where I live anyway, there's already quite a lot of individual environmental groups that already exist. So I think it's almost better, like you were saying, Ella, to sort of find something that you can join than to try and start up something new. So Transition Town, that I think you talked about, Jen, I think that switched to the Sustainable Town thing now, hasn't it? I think they've changed their brand a little bit. But for example, we have a Sustainable Cheshire, which is the town that I live in, which is a group of people who come together to talk about all sorts of things around sustainability in our town. And they then hook in with the town council, but also the local environmental group that looks after the river. They look, you know, they kind of hook in together with all the other groups around and start to we started to work to collaborate a little bit more. So I would say joining something that exists and trying to influence within that rather than trying to start up another thing is probably a good, because there are so many like-minded people around. It's just nice to go and find them, really, and hop on board with them rather than...
And sometimes I think it can be hard, you know, a sustainability group is very, very broad remit, and everyone will have a different thing that means to them. So sometimes taking a step back and going, okay, so I'm going to find a group of people who are interested in starting a repair cafe, or who wants to come together and do a swish or something like that, because those are events that, you know, there are really lovely, easy frameworks for putting them on. People kind of get it really easily, and it's such a lovely way of starting conversations with people who might not ordinarily come to kind of green events. And you might find that, you know, you start with this one event and some like-minded people come together, and then you can kind of have little splinter groups doing different things as well. So that can be, having a sort of event-based thing can be useful to start with as well, I think.
Yeah, it's a really good way to sort of communicate as well, and connect to other people who you might not meet. So I've been to a few events where there's been like Surfers Against Sewage, Friends of the Earth, Refill, and everyone supports each other and shares it likewise on all the different platforms, and that brings together a collective net of people. I think if you've got an idea of something that you'd like to do locally, it would be really good to connect with those groups so that they can share and spread the word, but also giving people easy things that they can do, that they can dip in and out of choosing what they'd like to do. They might not want to come to an event, but they might share it or help run it online in a certain way. It's just not everyone wants to do the same thing.
And a question about lockdown guilt. Does anyone else have lockdown guilt? It feels as though quite a few of our hard-won little wins are currently in reverse. So, you know, more difficult maybe to get refills at the moment, and kind of an increase in non-recyclable rubbish. Sue's well, everybody's nodding along there actually. Sue, have you found more rubbish?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a struggle in terms of actual, like, physical recycling hasn't been happening as normal, where we've got a good system, to be honest with you. We're quite lucky where we live, but they're not recycling food waste at the moment. And that really, really, really upsets me, having to put it in the normal bin, things like that. But, you know, the situation is what it is. I've kind of got behind me here, you won't be able to see them, but because my business is a sewing business, I have a lot of fabric that I usually, you know, scrap fabric that I would usually recycle that I can't get rid of at the moment because it's just piling up in the corner, and one day it will go to the right place. It's definitely a struggle, but I think also we've had to just accept some things are going to be different, right? You know, for example, I'm a sort of dedicated Riverford customer. I buy all my fruit and veg from Riverford normally, and there's a lot of people really have experienced, because of demand, they've had to change their business a little bit, which is completely, you know, understandable, to be able to cater for the uptake that they've had, but it just didn't fit. The way they've had to operate at the moment just doesn't fit with the way that we shop, because frankly my kids won't eat spring greens unless I pin them down and force feed them. So rather than let that food go to waste, which is creating a new problem. Because I can't pick and choose what I want to buy from them, I've had to go elsewhere, but I did sort of send them a message saying, I still love you. It doesn't really work at the moment. And I'll be back as soon as I can. There's accepting that, you know, we're in the situation we're in, and just holding on to the principles, even if you can't hold on to the actions quite so tightly.
Oh, I like that.
Oh,
That's a sweet goal. Right, I'm really aware that we've got like a minute left. Any book recommendations or podcasts to do with everyday activism? I'm going to give my book and my podcast a little plug. My book is the Sustainable-ish Living Guide. So there's 12 chapters, each on a different area of life, and loads of there's action things at the end, encouraging you to pick an action to take at the end of each chapter. I have the Sustainable-ish podcast as well, which is on there. A couple of people saying Natalie Fee's book, which is How to Save the World for Free. Georgina's got a book coming out next year. Tell us about that.
So it's called Is It Really Green? It's 150 everyday eco dilemmas solved. Well, kind of solved. So things that you'd normally type into Google, trying to work out if it's better to do the washing up or have a dishwasher, or whether you should buy a second-hand car or an electric car. So all those lovely dilemmas. It was meant to be out next week, but it's now out in January. So blame Corona for that. But you can still pre-order it.
I'm glad you've written that book, so I don't have to, because that would have blown my mind to research that.
Yeah, and they wanted it in 4 months. I mean, it was insane, and it's all now done. And now we've got to sit and wait for 6 months. So I'll probably rewrite the introduction, I think, maybe.
Yes, it will be in a very different light. Ella, have you got any book or podcast recommendations for people?
Yeah, I've got 2 book recommendations. One is Lucy Siegel's Turning the Tide on Plastic, and the other is Gina Martin's How Be the Change book as well. She made upsetting illegal in the UK and she didn't have any experience. That's a really, really good book to show you how, again, we can all be the change.
Oh, you're on mute, Jen.
You're on mute.
Yes. Have you got any favourite books or podcasts that inspire you?
Yeah, one of my podcasts that I love listening to is the Hubbub Podcast.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, they're really good.
Easy listen. I listen to it when I'm working, and it's just all very kind of lighthearted and friendly, but actually goes into some really great issues in a way that's very accessible. So I really like that one. And then in terms of books, I haven't completely finished it yet, but I love The Future We Choose. By Christiana Figueres and John Rivett Carnac. Created the Paris Change Agreement essentially, and I just love the optimism and the that kind, in terms of inspiration. It's a real kind of yes, we could do this kind of tone, which just needs some fire in your belly is a good one to read.
Yeah, definitely. Someone else has put in the chat, Rob Hopkins, who's the founder of the transition movement. I think it's called
From What Is to What If.
Yes, that's the one.
Brilliant. Yeah.
So guys, this replay will be available as soon as we end the broadcast, and the chat stays there. So if there are links or anything that you want to get in the chat, just as a final thing, a massive thanks to our panelists for giving up their time to be on this. Do go, and I'll get them each to leave their to share their links and where you can come and find them in just a minute, but do go and kind of seek them out and support them and thank them. So Susanna, do you want to start? Where can we find you on social media?
So my main blog was all written on Facebook, so it's just 365 eco decisions on Facebook. I'm also dipping into Instagram, which is very modern of me, and I've got a website as well, which is a little bit more kind of article-y. There's not much on there yet. I've only just started that, but it's a little bit more sort of written pieces rather than a blog, if that makes sense.
Brilliant. Super. Ella, how about you?
Yeah, so you can sign the petition at www.change.org/plastic-free periods. I'm also on Twitter at Ella_Daish, Instagram at Ella Daish, and I've also got my own website at www.elladaish.com too.
Fabulous. And last but no means least, Georgina, where can we find Pebble?
So Pebbles at pebblemag.com for the website and all of our stories. It'd be lovely if you signed up for our newsletter, which is coming out on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays now, and has packed full of things to do at home. So you can sign up for that on the website, and then on social media, we're at Pebble Magazine on everything, I think. Yes.
Brilliant. And I'm saying this at the end of every talk. What we want from this festival, or what I want from this festival, is for people to take action. So maybe have a think while you're having your lunch. What is one small everyday activism action that I can do today? We've got a pledge board, which I'll put the link in the chat to, for people to come and share their kind of pledges and their promises that they're making. But yeah, do share in the chat or come into the Facebook group and share if you've been inspired to send a tweet or make a different buying decision or switch to plastic-free periods or sign Ella's petition or whatever. But do share it, because I think the more we talk about the action that we're taking, the more it inspires other people to kind of share the action that they're taking as well. So thank you so much, guys. It's been amazing, and for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Been absolutely brilliant, and I will catch you all very soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.